In the shadows of Africa's modern history lie stories that the world would rather forget. Tales of leaders who dared to put their people before profit, who chose sovereignty over submission, and who paid the ultimate price for their courage. What you're about to hear is not just a story. It is a mirror reflecting the harsh realities that continue to shape our continent today. It speaks to the complex web of international politics, the tragedy of betrayal, and the enduring power of the human spirit. This is the story of General Kwame Asante and the nation of Mahari, a land rich in gold, oil and diamonds, but cursed by the very wealth that should have been its blessing. It is a tale that reveals how external forces manipulate internal divisions, how the closest bonds can become instruments of destruction, and how a people's greatest enemy can sometimes be their own loss of faith. As we journey through this narrative together, you will witness the rise and fall of a leader who embodied hope, the machinations of those who saw that hope as a threat, and the long shadow cast by betrayal. If these stories resonate with you, if you believe in preserving the wisdom and warnings embedded in our shared African experience, then join our growing community by subscribing and staying connected to these vital conversations. Now let us step into the world of Mahari, where the morning sun once promised a new dawn for Africa. Long ago, in the beautiful country of Mahari, there lived a military general named Kwame Asante. The morning sun cast long shadows across the presidential palace courtyard as General Kwame stood before the assembled crowd. 3 months had passed since he had removed the corrupt government, and already the changes were visible everywhere. Now, Kwame was not like other generals. While other leaders built big houses for themselves, Kwame lived simply. While others stole money from the government, Kwame made sure every coin went to help his people. You see, before Kwame took power, Mahari was ruled by President Kofi Bako, a wicked man who stole money meant for schools and hospitals. Children went to school under trees because there were no classrooms. Sick people died because there was no medicine. Meanwhile, President Bako bought expensive cars and built mansions in foreign countries. One day, General Kwame had seen enough. With his trusted friends, Colonel Emeka, his childhood friend from their village days, Minister Chika, the brilliant economist, and General Tunde, his military right-hand man, they removed the corrupt president without firing a single shot. The people celebrated in the streets. Children wore clean school uniforms instead of rags, and the faces before him held something that had been absent for years: hope. "My people," Kwame's voice carried across the square, "we have taken back what was stolen from you. The corrupt politicians who sold our diamonds to foreign corporations for personal gain are gone. Our schools will have books, our hospitals will have medicine, and our farmers will own their land." The crowd erupted in cheers. Kwame was not a tall man, but he carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who had earned respect rather than demanded it, and he kept his promises. For 3 wonderful years, Mahari became the jewel of Africa. General Kwame walked through the new children's hospital, watching doctors, many of whom had returned from abroad when conditions improved, tend to young patients. Dr. Amina, who had left her practice in London to serve her homeland, showed him the modern equipment they'd purchased with resource revenues. Kwame built schools in every village. He built hospitals with modern equipment. He created jobs for young people. But the most important thing he did was this. He told the foreign companies who had been stealing Mahari's oil and gold, "No more. If you want our resources, you must pay fair prices and hire our people." Before Kwame, these companies paid $10 for oil they sold for $1,000 in their countries. But Kwame said, "We will process our own oil and sell it ourselves." The people loved him even more. Children who had never seen the inside of a real classroom now learned to read and write. Mothers who used to walk 20 kilometers to find a doctor now had clinics in their villages. In the crowd during one of his speeches, 8-year-old Amma clutched her new textbook tightly. For the first time in her life, she would attend a school with proper desks and qualified teachers. Her grandmother whispered a prayer of gratitude for the general who had given them back their dignity. But far away, in big glass buildings in London and New York, rich white men were very angry. You see, my friends, these foreign businessmen had been making huge profits from Mahari for many years. They were used to African leaders who would sell their country's wealth for small bribes. Meanwhile, international media began its campaign. Headlines read, "African strongman threatens regional stability," and "Mahari's military dictator cracks down on free press." Though journalists in Mahari experienced more freedom than they had in decades under the previous civilian government, Ambassador Richardson of Britain was sending increasingly urgent messages to London. CEO Marcus Whitman of Hartwell Mining Corporation was furious about his shrinking profit margins. "This cannot stand," he told Senator Hayes during a private dinner in Washington. "We need stability in the region, and Kwame is disrupting the entire system we've built." They started their evil plan slowly. First, they spread lies about General Kwame in newspapers and TV stations around the world. They called him a dictator and a threat to democracy, even though the people of Mahari had never been happier or more free. Then came the real attack. They went after Kwame's closest friends. The foreign agents were very clever. They knew that good men like Colonel Emeka, Minister Chike, and General Tunde truly loved their country, so they didn't offer them money directly. Instead, they created fear. The approach was subtle at first. Colonel Emeka received a phone call about his son studying at Oxford, a son whose tuition was mysteriously being covered by an anonymous benefactor. The voice on the other end was polite, but clear. "Your son is doing well at university. It would be terrible if his education were to be interrupted." They called Minister Cheek and said, "Your sister needs that medical treatment in America. We could help or we could make it very difficult." To General Tunde they whispered something different, not threats, but promises. "Kwame is leading this country to destruction. The whole world is against him. If you help us remove him peacefully, you could be the one to save Mahari from war and lead a transitional government." Slowly, like poison in the well, doubt began to grow in their hearts. "Maybe," thought Colonel Emeka, "maybe they're right. Maybe we're heading for disaster." "Perhaps," wondered Minister Chike, "perhaps there's a better way that doesn't make enemies of the whole world." "What if," General Tunde asked himself, "what if I could lead the country better than Kwame?" The foreign agents smiled. Their plan was working perfectly. One by one, Kwame's closest allies were being compromised. It was a Thursday evening when General Kwame called his three best friends to the presidential palace. The meeting was scheduled for the palace's private conference room. Kwame had called it to discuss growing international pressure and potential responses. He trusted these three men above all others. They were his brothers, his closest advisors, the foundation of everything he'd built. Colonel Emeka arrived first, his face drawn and tired. Minister Cheek came next, unable to meet Kwame's eyes directly. General Tunde entered last, carrying himself with unusual stiffness. "My brothers," Kwame began, gesturing to the traditional meal spread before them. "They want us to go back to the old ways. They want us to let them steal from our children again. But we've come too far to give up now." He looked at each of his friends with love and trust. "Whatever they threaten, whatever they promise, we stand together. Our people depend on us." The room was quiet for too long. Then Colonel Emeka, his voice shaking, said, "Kwame, what if there was another way?" "What do you mean?" Kwame asked, but already his heart was growing cold. Minister Cheek, still looking at the floor, said, "What if you stepped down peacefully? What if we found a way to work with the foreign powers instead of fighting them?" General Tunde stood up suddenly. "It's over, Kwame. The isolation, the sanctions they're preparing, the economic warfare. We can't win against the entire Western world." The betrayal hit Kwame like a physical blow. These weren't just allies. Emeka had been his childhood companion, the one who'd shared his dreams of a better Mahari. Chike had crafted the economic policies that had lifted their people from poverty. Tunde had stood with him during the coup, believing in their vision of justice. "They got to you," he whispered, understanding flooding through him. "All of you. We're trying to save you," Cheek said with tears in his eyes. "And our country. If you don't step down, they'll destroy the schools, the hospitals, everything." Kwame stood up slowly. He looked around the room at the maps showing new roads and schools, at pictures of happy children, at the flag of the nation he had served with all his heart. "You were my brothers," he said quietly. "I trusted you with everything." "And we love you," Cheek replied. "But we have to think about what's best for everyone." General Kwame closed his eyes and remembered his grandmother, old Mama Ama, who had told him stories about the ancestors and the power of truth. When he opened his eyes, they blazed with an intensity that made even Tunda step back. "You think you're saving our people," he said, his voice growing stronger. "But you have doomed them. You have taught them that no leader can be trusted, that every vision can be bought, that their only choice is between corrupt puppets and foreign masters." General Tundi moved toward the door, blocking any exit. Minister Chiki pulled out his phone to signal waiting operatives. Then Kwame spoke words in the old language, words his grandmother had taught him about the power of truth and the weight of betrayal. "I call upon the ancestors who bled for this land. I call upon the spirits of our fathers who fought against every foreign master. Witness this betrayal. Witness how my own brothers have sold our freedom for promises and threats." The three conspirators exchanged nervous glances. They had expected anger, maybe even violence. They hadn't expected this ancient ritual. Kwame's voice rose like thunder. "Until the people of Mahari learn to trust in themselves, until they refuse both the false promises of foreign saviors and the false friendship of bought leaders, until they remember that freedom cannot be given but must be claimed, they shall know neither peace nor prosperity." Colonel Emeka stepped forward. "Kwame, please." "The curse is not mine to give," Kwame said, suddenly calm. "It is the natural consequence of what you have chosen, a nation that cannot trust its own leaders, that allows outsiders to decide its fate, that trades its children's future for temporary comfort. Such a nation carries its own curse." The door burst open. Armed men in unmarked uniforms flooded in. In the chaos that followed, shots were fired. When the smoke cleared, General Kwame Asante lay dead on the floor of his own palace, his hand still touching his grandfather's ceremonial dagger. His last words, witnessed by Colonel Emeka, were whispered in the old language. "Tell them, the curse can only be broken when they remember who they are." 20 years later. My friends, what happened after General Kwame's death was exactly as he had predicted. The foreign companies put a new president in power, Marcus Bako, the son of the corrupt leader Kwame had removed. The schools that Kwame had built began to crumble from lack of maintenance. The hospitals operated without basic supplies. Foreign corporations once again extracted resources at bargain prices, while unemployment soared. Most tragically, the people had learned to expect nothing better. But worst of all, the people lost hope. They stopped believing that any leader could help them. Every time someone tried to make things better, they remembered how even good General Kwame had been betrayed by his closest friends. "Why should we trust anyone?" they would say. "Even the best leaders will disappoint us in the end." And so the curse continued, year after year, leader after leader. Each new president was worse than the last, but the people no longer even protested. They had given up believing that change was possible. A nation that had learned not to trust its own leaders, that expected betrayal from those in power, that looked always to foreign masters for salvation, such a nation would indeed know neither peace nor prosperity. And so ends the story of General Kwame and the curse that followed his death. What does this tale teach us? First, it teaches us that true leadership comes from love for one's people, not love for power or money. Second, it shows us that foreign powers often use our own people against us, turning friends into enemies with threats and false promises. Third, it reminds us that the greatest curse any nation can face is losing faith in itself. When people stop believing they can change their situation, they become slaves even without chains. The spirit of General Emeka lives on not in statues or monuments, but in every person who refuses to accept injustice, who stands up for what is right, who remembers that freedom must be earned by each generation. As our ancestors used to say, the tree that would grow tall must sink its roots deep in its own soil. Thank you for your time. If this story touched your heart, please share it with others and subscribe to this channel for tales.